This is the moment for each one of us to step up and step in, discovering the leader within ourselves. And friends, when it comes to leadership, I borrow Roshi Joan Halifax's words. We have to develop both a strong back and a soft front. Strong back, soft front. On the strong back, there may come the moment, sooner or later, maybe sooner rather than later, when each of us will be called upon to decide whether we stand in solidarity of the most vulnerable, whether we form a circle of defense around those who have been singled out to bear the brunt of the assaults, whether we know them personally or not. And should we choose solidarity, let us be clear. Solidarity is not the same as support. Support can and usually is occasional. It can be given and then withdrawn. Solidarity requires brave, sustained commitment. On the soft front, I would like to offer the act of the simple and powerful kindness. But let us not confuse kindness with weakness. Kindness also requires immense courage. The courage to choose compassion when it would be easier to choose indifference. The courage to reach across divides when it would be much more comfortable to remain separate and oblivious. In this era of confrontations, kindness becomes an act of radical support for each other, where each of us can think and act from our highest selves with unbounded positive impact. Because what makes kindness truly powerful is its ripple effect. Like dropping a stone in still water, each act creates waves that extends far beyond what we can see. We know many things have to change. That is not difficult to realize. But we forget that all change occurs as the result of interactions between people. How the world would be different if solidarity and kindness were the marrow of our bones. If each of our interactions were firmly grounded in caring for each other. Some people attribute to the renowned anthropologist, Dr. Margaret Mead, the story that she was once asked, what was the first sign of civilization? After a thoughtful pause, she answered that the first sign of civilization was a healed femur bone. 31,000 years ago, in humanity's earliest days, a broken thigh bone was a death sentence. Even if the victim could have survived the injury, they would not have been able to gather food for themselves or defend themselves against an animal attack. A broken thigh bone was a slow but certain death, unless some other person or group of people acted beyond their own self-interest out of solidarity and kindness to provide the necessary care over an extended period of time. In our collective journey toward healing our fractured world, we would do well to recognize that civilization emerged not from dominance or supremacy, but from courage and care. The brokenness we see today is not our final state. Like a plant breaking through harsh soil to reach sunlight, each of us must break through the walls that divide us, because in our interconnected world, when one part of humanity suffers, we all bear the wound. Through our mindful thinking, speaking, and acting, we can foster a reality where broken bones, broken spirits, broken promises, and broken systems all find their healing. My friends, may each of you thrive in countless intentional acts of solidarity and kindness. And may each of us cultivate a shared world where healing happens through millions of small acts of care, rippling outward to touch every corner of society and every sentient being.
Well, thank you very much for those inspiring words. And I know originally I was going to ask you about um, optimism and a joyful um, approach, and you emailed me and said, I have to talk about the moment, and I'm grateful that you have, and you're bringing us into this moment. Which, by the way, I didn't acknowledge or mention that today there are protests again around our country, and so there are a lot of people. Uh, as my wife and I 2 weeks ago were in protests. How many people a couple of weeks ago were in one of those protests? So many hands up here. There's something about getting out together and knowing that we're not alone, and that is very moving and energizing. Mm. But maybe I can follow up first with something to ask you, Christiana. When we're not out there in the streets with a few thousand others, with the signs, inspired like I was a couple of weeks ago, um, it's so easy to go down that rabbit hole of despair or fear or helplessness, um, or hopelessness, even whether it's about the future or right now. So perhaps you could say a few words following up on this solidarity, how to move from that sense of incapacitation almost to step forward and say, okay, I'm in, besides just the next demonstration, whenever that is, but I'm in and want to show up. What's the inner resource that helps one cross that chasm of inertia to connection and action? Any thoughts you could share?
Well, first, James, nothing wrong with getting out there on the streets. And I'm afraid we will have to be doing much more of that in coming days and weeks. So certainly nothing wrong with that. And as we prepare to go out in the streets or not, because there may be some who choose not to do so, what I feel is important is first to not turn away from the anger and the helplessness and the hopelessness and the despair. Those are all very powerful emotions. It's a whole family of emotions that has huge latent power, which if we turn toward those emotions and welcome them from an embodied presence perspective, then we can feel much as the land that becomes much richer and much more fertile when we put compost, decomposing organic material on it. Same thing for us. We can actually understand that those feelings are maybe the turbocharged energy that will get us either out there physically or out there internally, that will really unleash our capacity for solidarity and for caring. And sometimes it expresses itself by going out in the street. Sometimes it expresses itself by the way that we treat the person standing in line at the grocery store, or the way we get up for a person who clearly needs a seat on the bus much more than we do. The fact is that our daily life is just so rich with opportunities for us to practice much more mindfully our caring, our solidarity. And it is important to do so because as we practice, we actually strengthen that muscle. We humans, like other animals on this planet, like other sentient beings, are wired to react to threat in a very different way. We're wired to flee, to fight, or to freeze. Those are the three reactions that we are wired to and that we have been practicing for 30,000 years. So to begin to open the new neural path that says, yes, we want to fight, or yes, I want to flee, or yes, I want to pretend like this is not happening. Totally understand that those are our natural, intuitive reactions. And at the same time, it is the moment to not condemn those reactions, but really ask ourselves, are those really my only three options? Or do I have another one? Can I pause? Can I take 3 deep breaths? And instead of reacting the way we all would, can I actually choose a different response? One that is really rooted in solidarity, in caring, in love. And the beauty of that, once we make that choice, as I was saying, it's almost like magical dust. It's like little magical dust, that you can sort of sprinkle around you. And then you see that reverberated in the people that surround you. You don't even have to say, by the way, that was an act of solidarity and caring. You don't have to say that. You don't have to make any announcements. It is the presence that you bring to it, the intention that you bring to every thought, to every word, to every action. And it is that intention, that depth of groundedness that then calls forth a very similar depth, whether conscious or unconscious in the other people, that matches yours. So it is like magical dust. And we forget that we have that magical dust to sprinkle all around us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. People are going here. So just to follow up, I know a bit of your story. And in fact, you were sitting on this this stage a number of years ago. You and Jack were here for one of the climate days, and was inspired, and that you went through your own despair and needing to process all of those feelings um, when it seemed like you didn't have any answer, and then you found Buddhism, you found the Dharma, and I wonder if you share a little bit about that process for you, that transformation, and people here and probably most of the people online are somewhere in that process themselves. And maybe you could share a little bit about how the understandings from these teachings help you to metabolize and process and come out with that kindness and that goodness and that magical dust that seems to activate others as well.
Yeah, I have been very public about the fact that I became suicidal, just to go straight to the straight to the core of the issue. I became suicidal when my marriage all of a sudden broke into pieces right before my eyes, and it was a very dark period. In fact, a whole year in which I really struggled with my suicidal thoughts, and I had at night, and I had to get up and lead the climate convention to the Paris Agreement. So I had to force myself into a very different mindset, starting at 7 in the morning. And because the universe is so wise, I was led to Buddhism and to Thai's teachings. And what I notice now, more than a decade later, is that it is precisely that experience of having been in the depths of despair and the exercise of beginning to build what I called my ladder. I recognized for myself that I was at the bottom of a very, very dark hole, and that there were teachings that would help me to climb the ladder slowly, because it doesn't happen overnight. But for myself, I constructed that ladder, and I continued to study and meditate and practice in order to slowly but surely get to a higher rung of the ladder. Now, very often I would slip 3 rungs, and that happens. And a lot of love and a lot of compassion for those moments in which we just slip off the rung. And sometimes you go like, what? All the advance that I had, and now I am back at the bottom. So a lot of compassion for those moments. But as I say, more than a decade later, I feel that my ladder is stronger than it was, and I know that it will become even stronger. I know that the ladder does not have a final destination. I know that this is a life journey. And above all, I have such love and such compassion for others who are struggling to build their own ladder. Because if you've never been in that dark hole, there is no way that you can possibly understand or resonate with the deep despair
Mhm.
that so many people are feeling, whether it is because of a broken marriage, whether it is because of the broken system in society, whether it is because we see the disappearance of so many species around us, whether it is that we see that these ecosystems are in huge danger of tipping over into different ecosystems. The list is long of issues that can send us into the dark hole. And so for me, I don't turn away from those issues. I really am fully there for them. And I hold them in one hand and I hold my ladder in the other. That's why we have two hands. Now we know why we have two hands. So you can hold the pain, you can hold the sorrow, and we can challenge ourselves to make joy, happiness, and healing and love spring forth from the same ground, from the same ground. And that is the beauty. That is not like you have one ground for sorrow and one ground for joy. No, it's the same ground. It is this incredibly rich, complex, beautifully mysterious ground that is inside each one of us. So, ladders, build your
um, yeah, I often say when somebody's going through a really hard time, that this is part of their bodhisattva training, that they will process it and be able to be there for someone else. Um, but just now to follow up that sorrow and that joy, um, if I can uh, talk about a little bit about optimism. I've been so moved and it's been delicious to hear you talk about how to hold what's to come. Um, and if you would say a few words about that alchemical process of composting, one Tibetan teacher called it manure for Bodhi, the manure for enlightenment, how it gets composted into opening up to possibilities that are more energizing and inspiring. That's one of your real gifts. And I'd love if you could share some words about that.
happily. And when you used the term manuring for body, all of a sudden what flashed into my mind is that one day in this depths of despair that I had more than a decade ago, I was in a cow farm and I walked out of the little hut that I was staying in and took a little walk around and came upon a huge, huge pile of manure. Huge. I mean, it was a mountain of manure that the farmer had diligently collected, heaven only knows, uh, over how much time. It was literally the biggest mountain of manure I have ever seen. And it was so large that I couldn't really take it all in by just keeping my eyes fixed on it. I actually had to do what you do when you're looking at a very tall tree, that your eyes go, droop, panoramic slide up all the way to the top. And as I did that, and my eyes went all the way to the top of that pile, what was awaiting my eyes at the top but a big old sunflower? And I just thought, okay, here we are. The lesson of life. Pile of manure and a sunflower at the very top. And sometimes life just, you know, sometimes the wisdom comes through words or through readings or through colleagues or whatever, and sometimes it just comes smack through your eyes. And I'm very visual, so I was so grateful that the universe had just gone like, okay, you're visual, here it is, boom, got it. So fantastic to be able to really understand the power of composting, and transforming, and very germane to the question that you asked about optimism. Because if we see optimism, and so many people do misunderstand, I think, the concept of optimism as being the result of something, and that's, for me, that is not optimism. For me, that is a celebration. If you were able to run a marathon, if you were able to, I don't know, lose the weight that you wanted to, if you're able to do whatever you wanted to do, and you achieve the goal that you set yourself for, then celebrate, because honestly, we don't celebrate ourselves enough, ourselves or others. So celebration is important, but that's not what I mean. For me, optimism is not the result or the achievement of having done something. It's actually quite the opposite. It is a choice, a decision about the kind of mindset with which we enter or face any challenge. That's the difference. It's not the output, it's the input. And I have a dear colleague who recently climbed Kilimanjaro crazily without any previous training. Now, I ask you, if she had gone on to say, I'd love to climb, but I haven't trained. I'm in pretty good shape, but have I done the training? No. Uh, will I be able to get to the summit? Probably not. You tell me, do you think she would have gotten there? No. That's the point. So, yes, she realized she wasn't, she hadn't been training for 3 months or whatever you're supposed to be doing. But her mindset was one of, I shall reach the summit, and I shall reach the summit at sunrise. Very specific. Now, that mindset does not guarantee success, for sure. So let's be humble about that. A optimistic mindset doesn't guarantee success, but it certainly helps. And a pessimistic mindset does guarantee failure. That's for sure. So, between guaranteeing failure and actually opening and expanding the space of getting to where we would like to, or at least walking the path in the direction of, because as we know, non attachment to outcome, but direction of growth has to be very clear. So that's the difference. The difference is of optimism is, I want to train my mind and engender the mindset of being able to make a difference in myself, that today I can be in an even more strengthened, positive, engaged manner than I was yesterday. Yes, I may fall down the rungs, but the trajectory is the one that really counts. The direction of travel. What is our direction of travel? And can I engage in the direction of travel that I choose with optimism, which means with conviction, with courage, with compassion, with love, with joy? That's what I mean by optimism. And honestly, nothing that we see right now, not the craziest of craziest of craziest news items that hit our newsfeed, contradicts what I've just said. Because we can always, always cultivate a mindset of optimism.
I'm right with you. Yeah, yeah. So it's having an inspiring vision is your direction, and then you see what you can do, what your part is, or what your next step is. But it's key to hold some kind of direction and vision. It sounds like you're saying.
Well, yes, and not just the direction, but the conviction that we will move in this direction. It's not just to hold the direction and stand still. I
Yeah.
mean, for that, you could be a lighthouse. But that's not the point.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
point is not to be a static lighthouse. The point is to move
Mm-hmm.
in the direction that we have set ourselves.
Beautiful. One of my maxims that I learned many years ago is what the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve.
For those of us who are active in climate and biodiversity protection and safeguarding nature, fear is instilled almost every day by scientific reports and scientific projections of where we could go if we don't do our job. Recently, that fear has been escalated by the fear that is being instilled in so many people if they dare to speak up, if they dare to stand for human rights, for environmental integrity, for education. If there is right now a predominant feeling, it is fear. The interesting thing is that the fear around the destruction of nature is provoked in us by the irresponsible lack of action of so many different actors. The fear of safety, plain safety today, is instilled in us by much more deliberate and pointed actions that I spoke about in my talk with you. They are different, and yet they are the same. They are the same because what provokes the fear in us is the thought that that which we are seeing as the reality is the only possible outcome, that we will lose ecosystems, that we will lose many species, that humans may lose their capacity to adapt to changing conditions, that we may lose freedom of speech, that we may lose democracy. That is where the fear comes from. Because we treasure our natural environment, we treasure our social and political environment. And when there is an attack, then the sentiment of the possibility of losing it produces our fear. So interestingly enough, the other side of fear is love. That's why we're fearful. We're fearful because we love our nature, because we love our children, because we love our liberties. And when they come under attack, we go and retreat into fear. Now, it is a very understandable response, and one that we're actually pretty good at, have been practicing it for thousands of years, and not one that is going to be easily overcome. And yet, one that we can choose to embrace the fear. Hello, fear. I see that you're here. I know you. I've known you for a long time. That conversation with fear, just the acknowledgement that fear is there, already begins to puncture the myth of the supremacy of fear and begins to give us the opportunity to embrace it, difficult as that is, and then find what is adjacent. What other feelings, emotions are adjacent for us to the fear? And what emotions are adjacent that would help us to transmute that fear? Not to deny it, but rather to compost it, as we were saying. Fear is very powerful. You know, when we're fearful, we can feel butterflies in our stomach, our knees are trembling, our head is spinning. It is physically powerful. It puts us into a physically altered state, that powerful. So can we harness that power? Can we say, pretty impressive, pretty impressive. That power, that energy that is there for a good reason. It's in defense of that which we love. And the moment that we touch and identify that which we love, we begin to balance the fear with agency. There is no situation in which we don't have agency. We just convince ourselves that we don't have agency in this or that or the other. But our agency is never determined by the external world. Never. It is always determined by our internal world, by our internal sky. And we're in complete control of that. So fear, a good friend. If you want to go out there with a lot of courage to take a very, very difficult stand, make sure your boots are rooted in fear and your eyes are on the stars of love.
Mm. Thank you so much, Christiana. I think we've all been touched by your wisdom and your good heart and your love. So keep on doing what you're doing. Keep inspiring all of us.
Keep all of us doing what we're doing.
Yeah. And thank you for remember Outrage and Optimism. And her Christiana's book, "The Future We Choose: Surviving the Climate Crisis." Keep doing what you're doing and inspiring us. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, James. Really appreciate it.